Hello, and thank you for joining us today for a Vivid webinar. This is with the Performance Engineering Special Interest Group, or SIG, and today is the 9th of February, 2016, and we're going to be talking about performance engineering in Agile. So as we progress to the next slide, you will see that this is brought to you by the Vivid Performance Engineering SIG. There are 4 of us as leaders. I am Todd DeCapua. We also have Petar Pascarich, as well as Paul Shevlin and Chris Trimper, who is with us today as well. If you'd like to learn more or join this SIG, you can see there's a very simple bit.ly link here for you. Just go ahead and pop that in your browser. You'll go right to our page and simply register and join there. It's free. And again, we look forward to bringing you more of these types of sessions. For calendar year 2016, at a minimum, we're going to be doing one of these sessions the first Tuesday of every month, and you'll go ahead and see more of that calendar to come. On the next slide, we talk about who is hosting this session, so none less than Chris Trimper himself. Chris, currently with Independent Health, where he is the Application Services Manager in QA and Engineering. So again, a little bit more on him later. But in addition to the role that he is playing in Independent Health, he is also the Western New York Vivid chapter leader, has more than 10 years experience in software QA, 8 of those in test automation, and 4 of them using Hewlett-Packard Enterprise software. He currently manages a team of 5 QA engineers, and I can tell you, getting to know Chris, I've learned that at the heart of it, he's a technical geek. So again, Chris, thank you very much for hosting this session with us today. There's going to be 4 of us as panelists, and what you will find is this is going to be a rather collaborative conversation on what we all are very passionate about. Again, thinking about performance engineering, how it fits within Agile. Each of us, though, coming from a little bit of a different background. My experience, again, coming up as a developer, then moving QA and testing, then going into larger team and executive roles. Now being at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise as a technology analyst. Chris Trimper, we've done a brief introduction with him. You have a little bit on his background. Next is we are joined by Jonathan Wright. Jonathan is with Hitachi. He's currently the Director of Digital Engineering. He brings more than 15 years of international automation experience. He's a co-author of several different books. You probably heard him speak at different events like Star West, Star East, a Gartner event, some other events that have gone on in Europe and Australia as well. He is also the winner of the HPE Innovation Award for World Class Delivery in Prague, and then also in Dublin, those in 2015 and also in 2014. Jonathan, thank you for joining us. We are also joined by Brian Copeland. Brian with Cognizant Technology Solutions, currently the Senior Director of Quality Engineering and Assurance. He's got over 20 years of software development and quality leadership experience from a number of different industries, including aerospace, medical device, and commercial. So his significant experience is in leading large organizational transformational initiatives, specializing in quality assurance as well as business analysis. And one of the things that he was sharing with me is his expertise in a number of different Agile spaces, including SAFe, and how this applies across a multitude of different practices, including performance, and that's why he was interested in joining us today. Brian, thank you as well for joining us. Just a little bit of housekeeping as we get started. This is a live session, and it is being recorded. All these recordings are available to Vivid members. Again, there is no charge for becoming a regular Vivid member, so I would encourage you to check out vividworldwide.org to learn more about that. We will also be holding a question and answer session towards the end. However, what you should see is if you go to the next slide, we will see that there's a webinar control panel, and you should see something that looks quite similar to this. I will be monitoring the question section as we go through the session. If you do have a question, please simply type it in there and click on the send button, and I will be sure to see it there. If we do not have time to get to it, as we've done in our previous webinars, we'll simply type it all up and make it available on this session's page within vivitworldwide.org so you can download and see all the responses from this panel. Today, again, we're going to have an exciting agenda. There's 4 main topics that we've listed out here. I want to spend a very little bit about, what is Agile? There's a lot of different definitions out there. So again, Chris will help walk us through that. What is performance engineering? Touching very briefly on that, but then going into kind of a bit of a collaborative conversation across all 4 of us as panelists, and how is performance engineering impacted by waterfall? How can Agile be impacted by performance engineering? And then getting right into some real-life stories, which I know we have a few prepared by myself, Jonathan, and also Brian. So looking forward to today's agenda. And with that, Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you to help us understand a little bit more about what is Agile.
Thanks, Todd. So all we wanted to do here is just remind folks about all that Agile is. So at the heart of it, Agile is an iterative development methodology. And, you see a couple different terms here. Agile comes in so many different flavors. I've taken a couple of them. Agile can be extreme programming. It can be lean, it can be Scrum, it can be feature-driven. And where can we fit performance into that? Because it's an ever-changing, ever-evolving life cycle that we develop in. And it's not easy to change. And we have some really great folks here that are going to help us learn about that. With that, we have a quick polling question to find out, where are you with Agile?
So again, I probably forgot to tell you guys, we're going to have 4 different polling questions through this event. And really the goal is, as we get into this conversation, to tailor it exactly to what you're looking for. But polling question number 1 is, how progressive are you in using Agile as your SDLC? Really just looking for you to select one here and click submit. So again, if you're kind of in those advanced stages and doing, pretty large, maybe the Scrum of Scrums, maybe you're, running X amount of automated builds and deploying out into production a certain or fairly high frequency daily, you might want to click advanced, average, just starting, or none. So again, we're not doing anything as it would relate to Agile within our SDLC. So again, if you could just very quickly vote here. We're almost at 100%. We're just going to wait a few more moments. This should only take you a few seconds of your time. And we're just about to 100%, Chris, so let's just give it a little bit longer. All right, we will go with this, and you could go ahead and display the results for us, Terry. I would appreciate it. Excellent. So as you can see from the people who are participating with us today, the lead is just starting at 49%. Average is 43%. 0% are advanced, and 8% are none, or not doing anything in the Agile as far as their SDLC goes. So, Chris, I think the results that are coming back maybe a little different than what I would have thought initially. I would have thought more people would have been in the average to advanced and some in just starting, versus seeing average and just starting and a few at none. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that helps us realize really the use of what we're going to be talking about today, as well as, from all the different places I've been that have been Agile, you realize you're doing Agile until you take a moment and step back and you say, well, that really felt more fragile than Agile to me. And getting Agile right is really, really difficult, and adding a really good performance engineering practice to your Agile methodology might just take it up that notch to average or above.
That's absolutely a great point. And again, I may be happy that people are being a little bit conservative, because I think that tends to be not the case when I'm speaking with other people out in the world. Is oh yeah, we're doing Agile. What does that mean? We're doing stand-ups. Oh, okay, got it. So next, Chris, you had asked me to kind of briefly touch on performance engineering and be able to help define a little bit more about what that is. So again, what's on the slide here is, enhancing the common goal of a proper and quality ensured user experience under all circumstances made available through performance engineering. I think that's a good definition. Again, performance engineering is going to be defined a little bit differently from organization to organization. One of the things that I guess has helped me is as I've gone through, and this is something that I've done professionally for quite a long time, but as I meet new people and we talk about things, and again, some of those people being Jonathan and being Brian on with us today, is performance engineering represents a significant cultural shift in the way that organizations are viewing their essential processes. So it's not just one point in time, but it's really being able to embrace a number of different practices and capabilities, building in quality and building in performance throughout everything in that organization, focused on the end user. So again, that's a little bit longer maybe of a definition, Chris, than what you're looking for, but that's, again, picking up on what I've learned along the way. That might be another definition that we could think about. I know next, Chris, you were going to kind of take us into a pretty fun slide, so I'll let you go ahead and pick this one up.
As I was thinking about my journey from waterfall, and still today there are still some projects that for some reason or other are stuck in waterfall, I was reminded of that scrolling screen in Star Wars, where you have the story of a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And I chuckled and thought that a long time ago on a project that was waterfall, a long, long time ago. But it's very true. It feels like just yesterday, but so long ago at the same time that we were on waterfall, just sitting around anxiously waiting to performance test, ready to functional test, bringing that into the mix as well, and be able to bring quality into the mix. And now, with Agile, we can kind of slough that aside and say, well, that's what we did in the past, and now we're writing our whole new chapter, our whole new episode, and bringing to light more excitement and a little bit of geekdom, the same kind of excitement I might have had watching the latest episode with my 5-year-old in the drive-in. But still, now we can bring performance more to the forefront as opposed to twiddling our thumbs, waiting for the code to be finally ready for us to test. And this is a really exciting thing for us. So I want to bring a little bit of Star Wars geekdom excitement into this because it is just like that to me. With that, a slightly less exciting slide. Where in the world does performance engineering fit in an Agile world? Everywhere, as we've been saying. You have performance engineering in your requirements phase, in your development phase, in your testing phase, and now those phases are brought together in smaller chunks and smaller iterations, and you can continue to build and test as you grow. You can test each iteration out if there is a deliverable that's testable, as well as continue to ensure that something developed in iteration 1 works just as well, if not hopefully better, as it does in iteration 3 as you're building up for your release. And this applies to both new projects and existing projects, because you'll have Agile for projects that, you have a product that's already in production, you're just continuing to evolve it. Agile and performance engineering work wonderfully there because you're going to continue to build and grow things. Whereas on a new project, you can just continue to slowly chunk away at it and ensure quality and performance along through it. We're going to hear some amazing stories from our panelists in just a moment. With that, we have our second polling question.
Thank you, Chris. So in this polling question, again, if you can be a little bit quicker on your mouse, that will help us from a timing perspective. But as you can see, how are performance engineering practices incorporated into your SDLC? So regardless of what that SDLC looks like, are you guys, again, advanced? Are you average? Are you just starting? Or are you not doing this at all? So again, the idea of adopting performance engineering practices into it. Unfortunately, I think a lot of us have this experience that Chris was talking about is, waiting to the very end for performance testing. Again, what we're after here is thinking about performance engineering, building it in, making it part of the culture, thinking about and focusing on your end users. We're getting just about to 100%. If you haven't voted yet, please do so now. You've got a couple more seconds here. And as I'm watching them come in, Chris, right now about 50% or so are average. We will see if the vote shifts at all. with that, let's go ahead and close the poll. Go ahead and see what the results look like. Excellent. So from our quick poll here, what you can see is, again, the lead was average at 54%, then followed by just starting and at 22%, advanced at 10%. I'm sorry, none was next, and then advanced was last. So, Chris, we go average, just starting, none, and advanced. Jonathan, I don't know if you can take yourself off mute, but I'm interested in your thoughts on these results from this quick poll.
You know, it's definitely extremely interesting, Todd. You know, I kind of, you know, we talk about waterfall or adopting things, simple steps. And I remember a story where I was working for a large commodity trading organization. And the first thing we did was put some very lightweight metrics around let's not say what good is, but kind of some non-functional requirements, very high level, very lightweight. And the idea was whenever a build came in, we would monitor that to make sure each time someone committed that they wasn't not just breaking the build, but they weren't dropping the performance within a reasonable amount. Because I think it's small steps what you've got to make, and I think when it's the culture change that people kind of, like you said, wait right to the end to bring performance engineering in, when really it should be baked in from day one while they're making the decisions about the architecture and the, you know, and how they're going to build the code. And I think this is a real interesting shift, and I think this is kind of represents what the poll also represents.
That's great insight, Jonathan. Thank you very much. Chris, I'm going to hand it back over to you to jump into maintaining performance in Agile.
Yeah, so here we wanted to open up to our panelists and just ask some questions, because, you know, the biggest thing, especially for me, and I'm sure all of you are thinking is, all right, I have all of these iterations, I have, you know, continuously developed code being continually deployed, build servers, all this stuff. Holy cow, how do I maintain all that? How do I keep up? And I think the best place is to just ask folks who have been doing this. So let's just bounce a moment between Jonathan and Brian. So, you know, Jonathan, do you have something you can share with us about how do you keep up? How do you go crazy dealing with the continual change and the continued deployment, as well as staying up with technology changes with Agile?
Absolutely, and I think we're going to touch this really later on around how you actually look at maybe having agile non-functional requirements and how you actually manage those, because you're absolutely right. As new features come through, technology changes, change requests, you've got to be able to deal with the fast pace of that. And in a way, you feel like you're going to attach to a story some kind of task that's performance related. And actually this is really interesting, and I'd like to be interested to see what Brian thinks of that in that kind of safe fall kind of model where you've got huge kind of portfolio level ambitions or themes of what your organization is trying to achieve.
Yeah, thanks. And I think it's really interesting to look at this in really two different ways. One is to look at all the business as usual work and how do we maintain performance with all of our technology changes, our bug fixes and enhancements with production support. And looking at, do we have continuous testing happening within our organization as part of our DevOps or our continuous testing model? We are very good about implementing continuous automation from a regression suite perspective, but that should absolutely include our performance regression suite as well, and have that build verification test, those continuous performance tests running in an environment so that we can see the impact of both technology changes and bug fixes real time. The second piece of it is ensuring that we are planning for Agile performance as part of our programs and our projects, whether that's in scaled Agile where you have multiple trains running and multiple teams running, and we'll talk about that just in a little bit. But to plan for that performance as part of how we do business before we start programs is essential to delivering quality.
Absolutely. I really like those points, and there's a lot to be learned from and what you're saying. And it's nice to hear both of you admit that that it's no small feat, and it's not one of those things that as you become, let's say, a black belt in performance, it gets better. It's one of those things you just learn to cope with, and you learn how to look out for the warning signs and how to deal with it. Thank you both. I'd like to move on to some of the next pieces and really share just a tiny bit about how I've been able to maintain some sanity in a ever-growing, ever-changing world. And Brian touched upon what would be different teams working at the same time to, be able to bring together a product. And we've been struggling how to try to figure out how to deal with that at my workplace. And for now, we don't have the ability to tie into all the build servers. We're, not at that high mature level quite yet. Someday we'll be there. But what we've been doing actually is we've been scheduling a daily performance test in our environment. 9 p.m. has been the desired time that is free from all other weird network activity, and just that time that we've identified it's okay to do. And we're able to run our test every night, and this allows us to observe trends, to see what's going on. And then what was happening to us in the past is a team would say, "Oh, the deploy we just did had that impact performance." Like, "Oh, geez, we didn't even know you were doing anything because you're all off in your own little worlds doing stuff. We didn't know what to do." And now we can say, "Oh, well, you know what? We have performance results, and we can look and we can monitor, observe." And then additionally, if there was a change they make that they were not expecting to cause performance increase, but it did, we can find that. So every night we run our tests. Every morning we'll take a peek at them. Some mornings not as diligently as others, but we have all that data there available for us. And it was not the best, but it's a good fit solution for us for now. And I wanted to share that, following up from what these two folks were saying, as maybe a stepping stone into that until you get to a point where you can get yourself so embedded into these teams to work with them and have proper testing for them. Brian or Jonathan, if you have anything you wanted to add to that to share, feel free to jump in.
One thing I would like to add is I have a client that has taken a very similar approach, and what they've done is in their DR environment, they have what they call continuous performance and continuous automation. So they run performance tests 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in that environment. And so as changes are made to production, it could be a security patch, it could be a hot fix, a firewall rule change. That continuous testing is happening in that environment, and they get much quicker insights into the impact of those changes. So that may be something you look to consider.
That is very awesome. Thank you for that insight. I would love to see that happen, and that'd be something interesting worth talking to some of our infrastructure teams and finding out if we can do that.
I'd like to add on to that as well. I think one of the great things, I came across this another week ago, and a company said, "Oh, well, actually, what we do is we do something called scenario planning, which is kind of where we say, what if scenarios, right high end, what if our main services go down?" And then they look at some critical success criteria, these very high level, what do we need to operate as a business? And I know Todd's talked about this in the past, where you can literally say, what happens if our customers lose an hour of downtime? And then once you put those huge kind of critical success criteria up at the high level to what's important to your business, you can cascade that down towards multiple non-functional requirements that actually fit into that, and then you can have an application health. You can, like you said, once these builds come through, you can have a very high level view of saying, are our critical processes still intact? Are they going to be affected by this? Is our business going to be affected by this? And it's kind of an all green, everything's good, and it gives you that confidence around the performance of the actual solution or the platform. So that's one of the techniques that we've used before.
No, that's fantastic. I think that's something that's great for groups to learn about, because the what if scenarios are the ones that'll catch you. And being able to kind of not just storyboard those, but actually really make them happen is really great. I'd like to jump ahead to talking about both of your journey into Agile. Some of us have an opportunity to change companies, or you're working in a company that was waterfall, and now you're in a company that's been doing Agile. Others, there's an evolution within. Some other times you may champion that evolution itself. So this time, let's start with Brian, and tell us a little bit about your journey to Agile. Maybe touch upon maybe initial reward that you found in there to share with the team, as well as maybe a pain point or two that you ran into with making that switch.
Yeah, so it's that's an interesting question. I think I was forced into making the Agile journey through my change from being a director of quality organizations to being an actual consultant. And as a consultant, I came into exposure to Agile practices. And at first, you look with a negative view and a negative lens, and you look at it as fragile and all of the problems and all of the issues. But then as I dug into it deeper, got my certifications, I really started to understand what Agile could be. Not necessarily what it was at every company, but what it could be. And I started to begin to work with clients to help them understand how to make Agile work and how to make it effective in their organization. And I spend a majority of my time today working with C-level officers and companies looking at how to make their Agile transformation successful and helping them avoid the pitfalls of just doing something that's Agile-like, right? Using the names, using the new words they learned, like stand-up and sprint, and really becoming Agilists and letting Agile drive their behaviors and turning off the waterfall mindset, right, where I need all these reports, I need all the planning, I need project management. That's really was the big change for me. And, as I evolved through that, I've become a champion of Agile, especially as it relates to testing.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm pleased to hear that you're one of the many that saw it at first and didn't just see this ray of hope, but realized that it's going to be a huge change and it's going to be a struggle, but we're able to find some niceties after the fact. That's cool. Jonathan, same to you. Do you want to talk a moment about your journey to Agile, touching upon maybe a pain point and then an initial reward or a reward that you've found with it?
Absolutely. I think I'll start by actually saying what I really like about performance engineering is building, is going back to those engineering principles and building in quality and performance from day one. And actually, I'm going to kind of switch it in a way that my journey to Agile is, now I'm going to be talking about a case study later on, and actually one of the case studies, Agile performance project. The other one is a very traditional waterfall for very good reasons. So one of them is a nuclear power station, another one's a virtual power station. You can kind of guess which one's which, but actually, apart from, like you said, the translation of the terminology, which is why things like Safe4 is so good, because it's it's a common usage and you can understand how it would directly apply. You can actually see how you can build performance engineering to both of those models. Yes, they're very different, the release cycles are very different, but you can take and remove certain requirements off each one and add other areas in there. So I think actually that there's benefit in both, but at the same time, what you want to do is not feel like you're pressured to actually deliver everything within these short periods of times. And if you think of it as an enabler performance engineering, that actually has a much wider scope. And I think that's where there's a bit of a shift. I'm actually talking later at another HP event this month around using ALM versus the next generation of ALM, which gets rid of the the requirements and moves more into stories and themes. So actually, it's quite interesting how those tools are designed with one methodology in mind, but in actual fact can support both. So, it's how what you do with it that counts, and how you go about it, and your methodology of your performance engineering approach, which is what's absolutely critical.
Well, that's great, and I think a lot of us will look forward to that talk. And what I like that you mentioned too is you mentioned that it's not just about performance; that there's an entire ecosystem here, both in practice and in tooling that we can use to aid us in the journey. One thing I'd like to add too is, keep in mind we would initially just slightly touched upon Agile. There's not a textbook definition of how you must do Agile. You can pick and choose the Agile that's right for your environment. Even in my team, we don't use pure Scrum. We actually go more on a Kanban style so that we can support all of our different projects and have this continuing thing. And to touch back a tiny bit about iterative, and it's something that I think that's very important. My director told me once, and I'll put it in more of a nicer phrase for the webinar viewers, is people are terrible at multitasking. So why do you have this giant task board of stuff to do? You take your one thing, you focus on your one small thing, and you finish it. And you keep doing that, and then you can deliver quality in small chunks. And I think that also applies to this as well. You can do these small chunks, small bits of quality, and then you actually feel really good about yourself in the project. And in the performance world, you feel really good about the performance that you're helping deliver. For everyone attending, we have a really fun polling question coming up next. It's our third one in the series. Todd, I'll throw it to you for this.
Thanks, Chris. And I don't know, this is probably the one polling question that I'm a little bit nervous about, but Chris wanted it in there, so here it is. So for polling question number 3, do you feel the HPE software capabilities enable you to deliver performance engineering within Agile? So again, just please select one of these pretty quickly. Yes, no, not sure, or want to learn more. So again, really looking to understand, again, from this Vivid worldwide performance engineering SIG community, how do you feel about the capabilities, and do they enable you to deliver performance engineering within Agile? So we are quickly getting votes in. And let's just, we could have a couple more seconds, Chris. I think we're going to get almost everyone in. All right. Well, if you haven't voted, I'm sorry. There's a few percent that have not, but let's go ahead and close the poll. And we can see the results now. So, Chris, as we look at these, we can see that want to learn more is at 40%. Yes is at 29%. Not sure is at 27%, and 4 is no. So again, the majority of the people responding, or 40%, want to learn more. I think that's.
I don't think that's as scary as you were thinking from an HPE's perspective. It actually fits into the previous polling questions, if you think about it, where people were saying that they were along their way to Agile and they thought they were doing Agile okay, but not quite at that advanced level they were thinking. I think that fits right in where, they are kind of going through this and maybe sort of pleading for a little bit of help, and hopefully we can provide that help or some insight with this talk and other things that we do. I don't know what your thoughts, Todd, but I think that's kind of on par with what I was thinking given the previous polling questions. It's not scary.
No, definitely not scary, and definitely an opportunity. And again, having Jonathan and Brian bringing their perspectives as well, I think are extraordinarily helpful. And a little bit, I've been through 3 large Agile transformations. The first one was back in 2006. And at that time, I was actually a customer of HP. And then a few years later, moved into a partner role where I was a partner with HP. And now, of course, being an employee of HPE. So, again, going through that evolution over the last almost, well, I guess it's been actually 10 years. It's interesting to see specifically this question and the answer of performance engineering with Agile. Some of the early days things like, Jonathan, when you mentioned Quality Center, I was like, oh, geez, that's right. When we tried to build the Agile accelerator, I was actually a customer at the time helping to build that. But again, that's going going back 10 years ago, trying to figure out how to enable those capabilities to deliver Agile and performance engineering together. So it's a great perspective, and I know on the next slide, Chris, we're kind of asking this question of, so what about performance engineering? What about Agile? What about all of that with HPE? And I just left your notes on here. So, this was the question that Chris asked me of, hey, there's things like Load Runner, like Performance Center. You can do all these different things with these capabilities, and I'm sure there's more. So I'm going to move through these fairly quickly. I don't like talking too much about products. I'd rather focus on, capabilities and kind of some future thinking ideas. But, I think it makes sense, given so many people do want to learn more or are not sure. So I'll move through them quickly, Chris. On the next slide, what you will see is, as we've heard Jonathan talk, Brian talk, even yourself, Chris, we've brought up things like DevOps. So in the center here is a diagram that can represent DevOps. As we move from left to right, this continuous integration and testing, building and testing, and then continuous delivery and deployment. You have all the release and deploy activities, and then continuous operations where we're operating and monitoring. So all of this kind of being wrapped by this continuous assessment as to how we're doing. Just for the benefit of the viewers and helping to answer your question specifically, so what about performance engineering and Agile and Hewlett Packard Enterprise? I've included a number of different product names and kind of where these would fit in to that overall life cycle. So as people are setting out on this DevOps or Agile journey and want to incorporate things like performance engineering, these are some areas that you could look into as to learning more about how Hewlett Packard Enterprise does support you in that mission. So the next slide gives a little bit of an interesting talking point that I have found as I work with people like Jonathan, like Brian, like Chris, of hey, let's just get a very basic diagram up, and can we talk about certain things? And if you start in the top right corner here where you see virtualized services for developer efficiency, again, this becomes kind of a first part of the conversation. And then as you keep moving around, you can see there's different elements that pop out. But again, this is just one story. It's one way that we start to have a conversation about how is it that looking front to back as we're doing our design, develop, build, test, all these elements, what are the things that we should think about? And again, I don't need to go through each one of these step by step, but I think you get the idea. In the next slide, I'm focusing more on what does this delivery cycle or delivery pipeline look like. You can see across the top there's 3 different checkpoints, and then the purple image at the top right is a release decision. So again, the idea here is really being able to show something that we've called, I think in the industry, like quality gates. So how is it that you're building in performance, and at each one of these areas it says check is that opportunity where you're getting some of these results. Jonathan had mentioned some very simple top-level metrics that give you that view in. I also love Brian's example of how that organization was leveraging their DR environment in this way. Again, all of these different elements. Here is, again, another very simple diagram, and you could map HPE capabilities into each one of these, but I think as I think about delivery and quality gates and things like Agile and performance engineering, this is one of those diagrams that I'd want to keep in mind. The next slide talks a bit about monitoring. This is a very old slide. I think I presented it in 2007 at the HP Software Universe in Washington, D.C. I was an employee at the largest internet bank in the United States, and this was something that we were doing then. But the idea is, being able to monitor, your production operational real-time scenarios, and then trying to improve those scenarios. So I'm in the upper left corner, improving those performance scenarios in my performance lab, but then also monitoring that from a capacity planning perspective, projecting what we're going to the future as far as demand goes, and then ultimately increasing our production quality and looking at our capacity planning in production to see how we're currently trending. So again, this cycle of monitoring, and when you think about things like performance engineering and Agile, become very, very important. And then as you think about what we just talked about on that delivery model of that workflow or that life cycle, as you go into production, how is it that you're incorporating these capabilities into what you're doing? So that is going to take us into our final polling question. So polling question number 4. And in this polling question, do you have enough examples or stories of how others are doing performance engineering within Agile? So a quite simple question, I believe, and was hoping to have more than simple answers for you. So just select one of these, please. Yes, no, or want more examples or stories. I think this is probably one of my favorite things to do. So if you're ever unfortunate enough to end up in a plane or a train or an Uber next to me, we're probably going to have this type of conversation, which I know Chris and Jonathan and Brian can all attest to as well. So, please go ahead and vote. We've just about got everyone in. We'll just wait here for about another 5 or 10 seconds.
While we're waiting, let me just add that the monitoring piece that Todd was talking about has been a vast improvement of my company's just performance insight, and it is just huge. And I know, cheap Vivid plug, I had an opportunity to do a small webinar on AppPulse Active, which is a tool that allows monitoring. It's not truly just about the tool, but about what the notion of monitoring can do for you. And it has been a huge improvement to everything that we do.
It's something that I think you learn it, and then once you learn it the first time, this is something we need to start adopting as a practice. So with that, I think we've got all the votes in. Let's go ahead and publish what we've got. Do you have enough examples and stories? It looks like from a response perspective, we've got 79% of the respondents want more examples or stories. 19% said no, and 2% said yes. So again, I think, Chris, probably what we were thinking is what we've got, but it's actually skewed much higher than I expected, which is 98% of the respondents said they do not have enough stories, and they want to have more examples or stories.
I'm going to go on the old adage that you never stop learning, and you probably never want to stop hearing stories. So I think that's okay, because someday when I'm old and gray or have no hair, I want to keep learning and I want to keep hearing stories, and I think that's a very good thing. We have some really great stories to share, and we're going to jump into those now if we are ready. Hand off to Jonathan. He's got some really great content about virtual power plants and some other wonderful things about Agile and performance engineering.
Thanks, Chris. No, that would be wonderful. So let me just give you a bit of a scene setter with this slide. I think I mentioned earlier about the difference between maybe using a traditional waterfall project on something like a nuclear power station, which is extremely risk averse, extremely complex, versus maybe some of these new projects that we're starting to see, like virtual power stations. And this is actually a project that I'm working on at the moment. And this is such an interesting one, because not only does it bring things like big data into the mix, predictive analytics, you're starting to bring in such more complex, more difficult challenges, which actually, when you start framing them, are the same kind of approaches that we've been dealing with things for quite a while. And I'm going to kind of build on what Todd's just been saying about the actual actually monitor and learn. And actually, it brings me back to this project, because we do use principles such as Lean UX, which, if you've come across that, the fundamental 3 pillars are build, measure, learn. And as you'd expect, you're going through, you're building something, you're applying a hypothesis, to prove an experiment, and then you learn from that. You might refine the algorithm, which is how you optimize output, or it could be about how you predict weather, or use historical weather to work out when solar panels are going to generate the most electricity in certain locations. But what you're doing is you're continuously learning. I mean, you're definitely continuously, iteratively approaching this. But how could you do it? That's, to me, this seems like a whole new brave world. And I've been working on a number of smart city projects which are very similar, with huge ecosystems of IoT devices, sensors that might not be available, especially in those environments, definitely in that kind of continuous delivery pipeline. How can you apply an approach, modern approaches like DevOps, in this same kind of context? Well, actually, it's not as difficult as you see. I know Todd kind of mentioned some of the tools which HPE have there to support you, and I think tools like HP Codar, the fact that performance centers can be integrated into your, maybe it's a Jenkins continuous build, which is quite interesting to say the next generation of ALM products are actually built with that pipeline in mind. So there's actually a pipeline section which allows you to go through that and through the release cycle. So actually this is really important, but equally you don't have those sensors or those kind of large ecosystems available in those performance environments. And this is something we've been dealing with for quite a while. And I know we talk around lifecycle virtualization, which is things like service virtualization and network virtualization. If we go on to the next slide, I'll give you a little example, a little teaser of some of the challenges we've been dealing with. You could even start bringing in the containerization models that you started seeing in within DevOps. But what you wanted to do is be able to release something that's very, you can start looking at doing applying performance engineering principles to it. Maybe that service doesn't actually exist, so that could be, in this particular case, this could be a power generator, that could be a certain type of wind or solar power panel. Part of that is the sensors giving information and providing a service. That service could be some kind of messaging bus on REST or JSON. Part of it's got some kind of component that you might have to look at using something like service virtualization to stub out. And equally, it might have some kind of data store, some kind of microservice architecture that then's passing all that information into big data. And then for items like this, you could probably expect that actually, the ability to process all that information about telling different wind generators to start spinning up and the messaging, you've got to be able to prove that quite early on, because the last thing you want is it comes to start generating power and you can't do it. Part of it is we've got to bake in performance, but we don't have access to these devices. So therefore, we've got to start taking advantage of some of these technologies that are around to actually build in and then start allow us to do performance engineering against, how long can we get the information that we need within 15 minutes? Can we scale up the power generation on that wind turbine to ramp up to generate the power to then deliver that to the customer? So this is starting to be interesting new performance challenges, but it's something that we can definitely approach in exactly what we're talking in this kind of baking in performance engineering. So I'm actually going to go on to the next slide, because I think there's some really key points that have been raised through here. And I think Todd's just brought up a really good one about the fact that we've got to learn, and where better to learn, but in the context where these applications or these solutions are deployed. And actually, I was going to talk about, which I will do on the next slide in a minute, but there's a tool that I've been using, part of Performance Sensor 12.5, which is called PAL 2.0, which is the latest release of it, which allows you to take real usage patterns from your application that's been deployed and allow you to generate more realistic profiles and start understanding usage patterns. So actually, we've been talking a lot around shift left, getting closer to the requirements definition, getting closer to, the stories and those defined, we must be able to, this power station must be able to generate the power within this amount of time. But equally, now that doesn't exist in this current context, but with this historical information of power for instance, power usage within a certain country, you can take that information, that historical information, all that real data from an environment, and start shifting that shift right, pulling that information across, and actually feeding in. And I look at it, and we talked about an iterative approach. We talked about how you're going round and all those items around that, the continuous insight, learning, delivery, testing, quality, all those components are at every single point is looking at the reuse. Maybe they're using those lifecycle virtualization tools to be able to stub out systems early on in the lifecycle, but then reuse those in the different environments so that you can keep on building and you can become that enabler, which I kind of mentioned. I know somebody in the mentioned in the chat about, it's really about what we always have capabilities that we have at now, and we have a certain level of maturity, but we're going to want to build on that and develop more sophisticated models and continuously learn. It's not just going to be running a pack which just runs every time, because that's not what happens. We're getting new features, new functionality that's getting released, and then new usage patterns coming out of actual real users, real customers. And that's where I think we're starting to have to rethink our approach. So I'll go on to the next slide quickly and just kind of show you something that's available to you right now. Now, I'd highly recommend just going to the additional components installation and going and downloading and then installing the PAL tool, because it's extremely simple. You can pull logs from absolutely anything. It could be from an Apache log, it could be any one of those components that I've talked about within those architectures, and you can then create and run and compare. And that's the really critical one: is my performance scenario realistic to the real usage of the application? And I think this is a game changer, because we're starting to think about the whole performance lifecycle, not just a single component. So with that, I'm going to hand back over, and hopefully we can bit more detail.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. That was fantastic. And as I'm going through, listening to everything everyone's saying, I'm realizing this is an awful lot for everyone to take in, but we can take little snippets from this, and we can start and do things small in an iterative, in an agile method, and maybe in the next 3 to 6 months come back, rewatch this webinar, and then take another piece and learn and check in and see where are we with our journey. I'd like to jump over to Brian so that we can have some time for some questions towards the end, and give Brian a chance to talk about Agile and performance in his world. And he's starting off with the requirements piece. So Brian, let me turn to you for a couple minutes.
All right, thank you. So if you can bring up that next slide. Yeah, so I'm going to abstract it out just a little bit and take Agile back a little bit from the details and look at, one of the principles of Agile is responding to change over following a plan. So the one thing that is absolute is that requirements will change throughout the delivery of an Agile program. And the key thing I want to get to is we have to take off our traditional waterfall hat, where we have a very robust, well-defined set of non-functional requirements before we start the program. We can't look to product owners to start writing stories for us that are performance-based. In Agile, you're going to see user stories that say, as a consumer, I want to delete email so that I can remove email from my inbox. Right? You're going to have something very specific to functionality that's needed in a solution, and it's not going to have a performance characteristic here. Where those performance characteristics will typically come to in Agile is in the form of either acceptance criteria or the definition of done. So as a performance engineer, you need to be engaged in the review and writing of those stories, and be asking questions about, okay, how fast does that need to happen? And as you know, with working with the business and working with product owners, you're going to hear it needs to be fast. But we need to help them understand what we need from them in order to get the right level of information to begin to write performance scripts. If you want to go to the next slide. And as we then move into Agile and start writing from those scripts. Mine isn't. We need to look at it as Agile is all about progressive elaboration of a solution. Each sprint is building on the foundation set in the previous sprint as new features and capabilities are added to the point when you realize a product or a potentially shippable product into production. And we need to make sure that we're focused on the performance acceptance criteria for each story and that we're testing at the story level. Now, we may have to bring in some non-traditional performance testing techniques, whether that be virtualization, to be able to test early, but we need to be testing early and start to build those pieces together and progressively expand throughout the iteration until we have a fully vetted end-to-end performance set. As the features expand, we want to verify performance across ever-increasing integrations of stories. And then we have to avoid that compulsion that we naturally have to wait till everything is done until we get a build that has all the functionality before we start performance testing. Now, does that mean there is not a place for end-to-end performance testing? Absolutely not. There is end-to-end performance testing. But end-to-end performance testing, if we're doing safe, would come in a hardening sprint, or it may come at the end of a set of sprints. But what we don't want to have is turning our sprints into little mini waterfalls, where we get define, then build, then test, and it happens as just a little phased approach. We need to make sure we're testing at that story level and bringing it together at the end. And then I added something at the bottom that says, just because there's a performance acceptance criteria on all stories doesn't mean the app's going to perform when it's placed together in its end-to-end environment. If you've heard of the term tolerance stack, if I establish performance on each story, when I stack all of the worst case together, that may exceed my end-to-end expectations. And because I'm defining the product as I go and elaborating as I go, when I begin, I may not know what that end level performance needs to be. So you need, as a performance engineer, really become more advisory earlier in the iteration to advise them on what they need to be considering so that you don't end up with an out-of-control application. You can go to the next slide. So as we get into this, I did want to just talk just a little bit about Scaled Agile for just a second. And I don't know how many of you have taken the Scaled Agile framework journey and moved from maybe basic Scrum to Scaled Agile, but it's a much more complex system that's designed to simplify extremely large enterprises delivering major programs. And so the whole idea of having individual release trains and trains made up of up to 10 teams, and each team having up to 10 resources, you've got to figure out where does your performance team belong. And our natural inclination is to say, let's keep them outside as a shared service. You come to us, and I heard one case where they're using a Kanban, and work comes in, and we'll just take work into our Kanban and we'll process it through. And that's great if you're doing enterprise-level performance testing. But when you start to get down to performance testing at the story level, those performance engineers, those performance resources need to be in that Agile team so they can participate in the definition and clarification of those stories and work with development directly to build out those performance tests very early in the sprint. And that gets to the point where we need to take off our old hat of performance engineers are special people, and that nobody else can do performance engineering but a performance engineer. And we need to start moving towards a quality engineering mindset that says, instead of having traditional old school QA of manual testers, we have more quality engineers that are able to do all types of quality testing, whether that be automation, whether that be performance, whether that be data warehouse testing. We build more engineering resources and less traditional siloed team members. Another place where you may see performance team members is in that systems team. And that systems team is going across teams within an Agile train. So they're working across multiple teams, probably doing some of that end-to-end performance testing together. So just keep that in mind as you start to move into the scaled Agile framework. You have to rethink how performance testing is organized. And I'll hand it back over.
Great. Thanks for the insight from both of you. That was fantastic. And I'm sorry that we had to cut short and we didn't have time, because I feel like both of you could have had, a whole session both on your content. And I like how there's a lot of crossover between, thinking about containers, small deliverable product, or minimal viable product, or in this case, minimal viable product performance. We have a final polling question. I apologize for the audience. We are going to go a little bit over, and hopefully that is okay because we'll give some time for question and answer. Todd, would you like to take the last polling question for us?
Sounds great. I apologize. I thought number 4 was last, but you're absolutely right. This one is extremely important too. So what is the number one reason preventing you from adopting performance engineering practices? Just select one of these: time, money, effort, value, or we are adopting performance engineering practices. And again, this is really just, as we look around the community and see what's going on, and, really want to provide you with information that you can use from this type of a poll as to, why is it that you're getting pushback or, not able to adopt performance engineering practices. Because, again, I think as we in the community would be able to talk about this, maybe, let's understand a bit more about it, and how can we help provide you with the information you need, if it is time, or if it is money, or if it is the level of effort or the value. Again, thinking about value could be value to your end user, could be value to your business, could be value to your technology team. So all of these are interesting options. But I know they're going to be very unique also to your environment. So just take a few seconds here, and if you haven't voted yet, please do so now. And let's go ahead and close the poll if we could. So, Chris, the results that we have are 43% of those polled said that they are adopting performance engineering practices, then followed by 23% are not able to because of money, 17% because of time, 11% due to value, and 6% due to effort. So 43% said they are adopting performance engineering practices, and the next one was 23% was money, and then 17% time.
Wow, that's fantastic. I was expecting more time and money issues. Or we should have put in there just selling. I think that's kind of wrapped into the value, but it's great to hear that so many folks are adopting it. And that's a more than perfect segue into our next slide of one tip. So I want to give each of us I hate to lock us into like 30 seconds or so, but a quick suggestion on, what's the one thing that you could suggest to our audience for adopting performance engineering practices for Agile today that would help you, in that continual adoption of performance engineering in Agile. So Todd, I'll start with you.
I guess in light of those poll results, time and money seem to be the two big drivers. My recommendation is just start doing something now. And, you've heard a lot from myself, from Brian, and also from Jonathan. Pick up on one of those ideas and start with it. Could be as simple as, what little bit of metrics can you get out today, and be able to show the value from a very little bit amount of effort regarding adopting some performance engineering practices earlier in the life cycle, and then being able to take that more broadly.
All right. Jonathan, to you, please. Same question.
So I'm just going to build exactly on what Todd's just said and actually say the same thing. It's evolution over revolution. So it's not a big bang, a new tool, a new piece of technology. It's continuous learning. It's learning about the performance lifecycle, so about your customers. So when we talked about the PAL tools, let's understand them better. Let's understand how we can add value. And I think, if you saw the SAFE model, there's actually a 4-level version of that which talks around value stream. And actually that is really important, showing the value to your organization, reducing the risk, reducing the exposure, reducing the potential downtime of that £1 million an hour. It's really important to start taking small steps in the right direction, but also getting buy-in and better visibility within the organization.
All right, excellent. And Brian, to you, please.
Yeah, and I think Jonathan was dead on when he said, you have to show the value. And this is really about looking at small wins, get a small win, use that to gain momentum so that you get that flywheel effect going. But the one thing I would say to my performance engineering brethren, learn Agile. Don't try to apply waterfall to Agile. Become an Agilist. Understand Agile, how to apply it, and where performance fits into Agile. And then do that and become effective in a small thing before you take on everything.
That's fantastic. And I'll throw my 2 cents in here, and it's really twofold. One is, never stop testing. Always continue to test and start knocking off those small things like everyone was saying. But a more of a personal side is make sure you bring the passion along with it, because an unpassionate performance engineer is going to be very methodical and mundane and probably give you 50% as opposed to giving you 110%. So definitely, I'm hoping that myself, I'm very jazzed up after this presentation. I hope it does the same for everyone else, and just driving that passion is very key. With that, we got a slide with some more information for folks, whether you take these links now or if you check them back when you rewatch this webinar someday in the future. And we'll leave this slide up for a moment, and we want to open up for questions. Todd, I think you might have been collecting some questions. Let's give it like 3 or 4 minutes of some question and answer. I know we have gone past the hour, but we want to give folks a chance to get their questions heard.
Sounds good. So we've gotten well over 20 questions in the queue right now. On this more information, I wanted to just briefly go through this. So you can see a very simple URL, the hpe.com/software/PE. That'll give you more of performance engineering from HPE Software's product specific. The second one down is Tech Beacon, and specifically this link goes to everything that's performance. So these are 85 to 90% of the people who contribute on Tech Beacon are thought leaders, like those of us that are on the phone right now, but experts in the industry as practitioners that are doing these things every day. So again, wanted to provide you with that link. You'll also see a link to a number of different blogs for Load Runner and Performance Center, as well as the bit.ly link below that for you. After each one of these, I try to write up a post-webinar blog, which will have a summary of the survey or poll results that we've gotten, as well as a link to where you can download and then rewatch the video, as well as the deck itself. And then the Q&A, we'll go ahead and post that as well at that same location. So again, you'll be able to find that in this blog in the next couple of days. And then the last one here is the SIG. Again, I want to encourage you guys to all participate in that. With that said, there was, Chris, a very specific question fairly early on that talked about, here it is, it's from Sunil. Hi, Chris, do you have an environment for performance test to get results repeatable?
Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh at you. I'm not laughing at anybody. If that's a question directed to me, I'll answer it super quick and allow the others to answer it. Unfortunately, no. The environments are incredibly expensive in terms of hardware, software licensing, and the like. And we actually leverage our UAT environment off hours. And the unfortunate problem with doing that is we have an environment that doesn't have the capability of rolling back. So we have to be very cautious with doing our tests and looking through our results and understanding that we have an environment that's technically continually growing. And another challenge that presents us is we have one and done data. We'll do a test, and other people that might have an opportunity to roll back their environment to bring it back to what their golden state is. We don't have that, so we continue to build golden on a daily basis or identify that data that's going to help us. So for me, no, not at this time. I have not found the money tree or won the lottery giving me the capability to build that wonderful, dedicated performance environment.
I guess, Chris, before others chime in, I'm just looking through this list. One of the questions that came in later was from Jay. The question here, and I think, Jonathan, this might be most focused towards you. What value does performance test creation developed and executed against virtualized services and components provide? And that's the end of the question. The comment is, it seems the results would be bogus. So again, the question is, what value does performance test creation developed, executed against virtualized services and components provide? So Jonathan, you want to take that?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's a fantastic question. And as you probably know, sitting within the network virtualization world, there is, the great thing about simulation is that it's going to improve the accuracy. I sat down with the infrastructure team today talking about a massive infrastructure project, and we're talking about infrastructure as code, platform as code, configuration as code. I'd hope maybe performance as code would eventually appear, but the great thing about that is these huge, and I think someone was talking about it on the questions, these huge and very expensive performance environments. If we're talking about containerization, or we're talking about microcontainers, these infrastructures are going to get extremely complex, extremely quickly, especially with machine-to-machine, with IoT coming onto it. So simulation is probably going to be one of those tools that's going to add some value and some indication. Now, tools like Hewlett-Packard Enterprise's Service Virtualization actually has a performance model built into it, which can give you an idea of how you'd spec that particular let's call it a message bus, or you can do some throttling on there. You can include that as part of your performance engineering scenario. So you can turn on service virtualization on and off as you're executing those scenarios. And it gives you an indication. I think the great thing when you start moving towards things like network virtualization and even network function virtualization, so that's the switches that you've not got, the load balancing, these complex ecosystems, you've got to do the best you can with the tools that are out there and are available. And I think this is, it's an absolutely great question. You don't want to emulate some kind of microservice and then end up finding that when it happens to be rolled out. I love the idea of being able to turn off a stub or a shim and then replace it with the real service. And then when it does, you should be as confident about the results that you get in the performance engineering world as if it was a virtual service. And that's only time will tell, and the products hopefully will get better and better at this.
Cool. Todd, I'm looking at the clock. I think we have time for just one more, unfortunately. If there's one great question, we can probably take the other questions offline.
Yes, I'm just looking through. If there's something in here for Brian real quick. So Brian, this one might be good, and I'm trying to read through the question a few times to understand exactly what it is, but I think from your perspective, and this came in from Sanjay, can you throw some lights on big enterprises where performance is sold as a service within the organization?
Absolutely. So, that really gets to the shared service model. So as you look at a performance organization, one of the challenges that many organizations have is having enough capacity and thought leadership to be able to manage performance across disparate programs and projects and lines of business, right, business units. So in several of the companies I've been an employee in and have helped clients with, we've built out the Center of Excellence model where you have a strong, centralized performance engineering group who does planning. They do capacity planning with and upfront performance engineering, but they also do support programs throughout the life cycle of a program for performance support. And they come in and provide almost an internal consulting service to the enterprise around performance. And that works out very well. And even in some of those organizations, we've been able to build out a costing model where it's a buy by the drink, and those projects and programs pay for that performance service to come in, almost like a profit center without, a P&L. And that's worked very well. I actually built that out in Deloitte & Touche when I managed quality assurance for Deloitte & Touche, built it out at Nielsen, the Nielsen company, and then several of the consulting engagements that we've done with large clients. We've built up that capability. It can be done. It enables you to support a large enterprise with a smaller team that's very skilled resources. Reduce your costs, reduce your overhead from a tooling perspective. You don't have disparate performance testing tools across the entire enterprise. You have a centralized model. Your licenses are managed more effectively. Your costs are managed.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Chris, over to you to close this out.
Great. I want to thank everyone for attending today. This has been an outstanding session beyond what I could have expected. So I thank both Jonathan and Brian for all of your insight, all of the great knowledge that you brought to us, of which I'm sure, like myself, it's going to take a couple of days to really soak in and absorb, but a lot of really great points to go back to and learn from. Just a reminder that there is a recording of this webinar. It's been recorded live, the whole thing, including the question and answers we just did, and it'll be available on the Vivid website in the next day. Anyone who attended, I believe, will get a link to it, and if not, you can just find it on our Performance Engineering SIG. And as Todd mentioned, there'll be a follow-up blog with maybe some more question and answer results in there. And feel free to reach out to the group, and if you know folks that may benefit from being in the SIG, it's a really fantastic SIG, great group of people, and we bring some really wonderful folks in to discuss great topics. I don't know if there's anything else from anyone else, but thank you all for joining. It's been a great day, and thanks.